what's up, everyone? Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. Excited to be back there with another client interview for you guys. And today I got Aidan on with us, and really excited about speaking with Aidan because he actually goes to a very small school. You're the first person from your school that we worked with, actually, and we worked with students from probably, I don't know, over 100 different schools and counting now. And so it's always exciting for us when we work with someone from a new school. Because we're always trying to just kind of grow that list, right? And so, but regardless, Aidan comes from a small school, and he just finished going through his summer 2023 recruiting process, was able to get a successful outcome. And so I want to get him on here to talk to you guys about just his whole experience going through the process, and maybe some of you out there too also go to very small schools, or maybe you're wondering if it's possible for you to get into banking or not. I'm sure Aidan has some insights that he can share with you that will hopefully help you along the way. So first of all, Aidan, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today, man.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I kind of already started doing this, but I think it's better to hear directly from you. If you can maybe introduce yourself real quick and just give people a sense of who you are, what your profile is, and then we can kind of take the conversation from there.
Yeah, so I'm going to be a rising junior at Vassar College in Poughkeepsie, New York. And while at Vassar, I'm majoring in economics. I also play soccer there. But one thing unique about Vassar, I've been a part of a few of our funds and business organizations, but because it is a smaller school, we don't have anything that's focused towards going into banking. There's very few people, if any, that get in. Most people will get in after going through an MBA program. It's something that's not really talked about at my school. It's always, if you're going to go in that kind of direction, you're going to go consulting. But I knew pretty early on that I didn't want to go into that field. I knew that banking was something for me, but I found myself kind of lost in what to do. I knew you had to network, so I was reaching out to all the people from my school that got into banking. But once you exhaust that list of 10 to 15 people, you don't really know what to do. And a lot of them are not necessarily as helpful because they're like, my undergrad school didn't help me. It was my MBA program. So it was a lot of navigating that. And I think I really lacked direction. And so coming across the program, I really wanted direction and kind of structure in terms of what I wanted to do. And ultimately, it really did kind of work out for me.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So you went there to play soccer, sounds like. And then how did you realize you want, because I feel like a lot of times people that get exposed to banking and realize they want to do banking is because they go to a school where a lot of people are doing banking, and people that go to Wharton, everyone wants to do banking at Wharton, right?
Yeah.
It seems like you weren't really in that type of environment. So what helped you realize that banking was what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I think you always kind of hear about what is that career that is really successful. I think that's something that stands out. But I always knew I was pretty interested in economics and finance, but I was so kind of confused about what a path could look like in terms of that. I had one of my friends actually at Vassar that's going and working at an investment bank right now. And I'd kind of spoken with him about what that could look like, but I had so many people around me that were really against banking and weren't really there in terms of kind of helping. They're like, why don't you do other careers that are a little bit easier to break into? But I think I was so dead set on pursuing something that I was passionate about. I grew up initially in Silicon Valley. You're constantly seeing M&A transactions, IPOs, whatever it may be. Even my grandfather is an entrepreneur, and I was always really interested in that. But I didn't know how to break in, and I didn't know how to be on the advisory side of that. So when I was kind of speaking with my friend, learning about what banking actually is, I realized that's where my interest truly lies. And I didn't want to kind of settle on another career just because it was easier, even if that path is less defined.
Got it. Got it. Okay. That makes sense. So it sounds like, you joined our program. So right now it's June, and you just finished recruiting. But you joined us back in November of last year, right? So it's been a little over half a year. Prior to that, prior to joining us, it sounds like you had done some networking with limited pool of alumni from your school, most of whom weren't super helpful. Aside from that, were you doing anything else on your own prior to Wall Street Mastermind in terms of like working towards this goal of breaking into banking?
Yeah, so I first knew I needed to understand what the field did. So I did a lot of research on that end in terms of like how to articulate when I'm speaking to these bankers, what am I even talking to them about? But I think I constantly, from the people I did know that were kind of interested in banking, I would get tossed the M&I 400 PDF, and it was just incredibly overwhelming. And I would go through like 20 questions, memorize them, and then the next day I would look at them and be like, I couldn't do these again because I have no clue what I just learned. I was just memorizing everything.
Mm.
And I was like, is there an easier way to do this? And I feel like I would always default back to just doing other things, doing networking because I kind of understood that better. But then the technical side and the interview side, because I had no one around me, I was really confused on what to do. So I was just really turning my gears in terms of trying to understand how to go through banking recruiting. And I think I got a lot of structure from Wall Street Mastermind in terms of understanding how you go through that process and also understanding that my resume was absolute crap. I came into it thinking I have a good GPA, I have some decent extracurriculars. And then I look at my resume now and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I was submitting my past resume to people.
That's funny. But that happens a lot actually. So you're not the only person that says that. It's just crazy because I mean, look, with stuff like your resume or even like your interview answers, I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit later too. I think like people put so much effort into that, right? Like even on their own. It's not like you are not trying to do a good job. And so people put so much effort into that. You go find whatever templates you find online, you do the best that you know how. And then when you're already doing the best that you know how, it's just hard to be able to like objectively see what else could possibly be better, right? Because like if you knew what could be better, then you would already be doing
Yeah.
it, right? It's like you being a soccer player, like I don't know if something's wrong with your technique or your form, like you probably have your coach point it out, but if your coach doesn't point it out, it's not like you know you're doing something wrong, right? You're not gonna be able to figure out like why things aren't working. And so um that's the tricky part is that I think a lot of people they overestimate where they're at in terms of like how qualified they are because from their point of view everything seems fine, right? Or they'll even go into interviews, come out and be like, yeah, I nailed that, and then they won't get the offer. It's like they have no idea what really hit them, right?
Yeah.
So I think like that's where the feedback loop is super important. But um I guess like what made you, so obviously understand that hey, you network with people, there aren't a lot of alumni, you try to study the MNI 400 questions guide on your own, which is like what everyone uses,
Mhm.
wasn't being super effective. um how'd you find Wall Street Mastermind, and like what made you want to join Wall Street Mastermind, I guess? And like also when you were considering joining something like this, I'm guessing, I mean, coming from your school, like you probably didn't know anyone that
Mhm.
had done this before. And so like, were you skeptical at all on like, is this actually going to work? Or can you just kind of like talk through your mindset at the time?
Yeah, so I think I'd kind of solidified September, October that I wanted to pursue banking. And I saw RBC was out, and I was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe there's internships out right now. I need to actually start stepping up my game.
Yeah.
And so when that came out, I had actually seen one of your, whether it be YouTube or Instagram, postings about kind of speaking about recruiting coming up. So I'd kind of stumbled upon that, heard about the program. I wasn't quite sure what it was, but I knew that I needed guidance, and I saw that that's what was offered. I was definitely skeptical. You kind of you see this website where it's saying placed all these kids into banks, and but you don't really know what's behind it. You, like you said, nobody from my school has ever worked with you guys, so I didn't really have anyone to be like vet it in a sense.
Yeah.
But I think after having conversations, having kind of the coffee chat with the alum as well from the program, understanding the value that it provides, I think it is really hard to understand when you can't really see it. But anything from just going on Slack, asking a question really quick, is this bank still doing recruiting? Or a quick question you have in regards to technicals or anything like that, that you can't necessarily see when you're initially going for the program. And I think that's what people can be skeptical about.
Yeah.
But I think it provides so much value in every single aspect of your recruiting journey. And it's not just 10 students each to one of the top banks that got in. We're talking hundreds of students that have been successful through the program. And I think understanding just the volume and actually getting to speak with people that have gone through the program really allowed me to understand the value, because I think those conversations were really what solidified me going into the program, seeing, oh, this student has done it and it can be done. And I think that's when I really made the jump to say, this is a program I not only want to be in, but really need to be in for my recruiting journey.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I totally agree with you. It's like our program is, I feel like it's so unique and it's so different from anything else that's out there that most people just, it's hard for them to visualize what is actually in it and like how different it actually is, right? So we probably need to do a better job of explaining all this stuff, to be honest, from a marketing standpoint. But I guess like now that you've gone through it though, right? So you tried doing some stuff on your own. Now you come out the other side. You were in the program for like 6 or 7 months as you were going through recruiting. Can you walk us through like what were some of the things that you did after you joined the program? Like how did your approach to recruiting change, if in any way? And like what kind of difference did you see in terms of just like results that you were getting?
Yeah, so I think immediately made edits to my resume within the first day. Got that back pretty quickly. And you mentioned I joined in November. By the end of November, if not the first week in December, I had a middle market boutique internship um, with an investment bank, and that was kind of my relevant experience that really I think propelled me forward through the recruiting process.
So within
And I
1 or 2 weeks.
Yep. I got a kind of email from them within a couple weeks and then finished the super day by the end of the month. And that really helped me a lot in terms of understanding. And also because that was so accelerated so quickly, having the modules to kind of prep basic technicals for that. Also, behavioral questions are extremely important as well, having the modules for that. And then kind of once I got through that, because I was so accelerated at the beginning of me joining the program, I really sequentially went through in terms of doing my networking, creating a spreadsheet, the absolute hundreds of names that I have on a spreadsheet that I reached out to. And I think the hard thing to understand for me was how many people you're reaching out to, how many people you're going to be working with. And you might not get anything. You email 500 or 600 people and you might get 50, 60 responses or 50, 60 calls, if that. And I think just going through that, it really prepped me to go through the rest of the program and understand that it's going to be really hard, even with these tools. But I think the way it's laid out, understanding going through networking, understanding going through behaviorals and technicals, really allows you to sequentially go through and understand how to best kind of shape yourself for the recruiting process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, coming from a small school like yours, where you guys maybe have like 10 and 15 alumni in total on Wall Street, you just don't have the luxury of like say someone who goes to Wharton and they have thousands of alumni on Wall Street, right? And so like you don't have that to tap into, which is okay. Like you still have to figure out a way to network with enough bankers, but you basically gonna have to like reach out to more people because your response rate is going to be relatively lower than maybe someone who goes to target school, right? But it kind of just comes down to one, like knowing having the right approach, and also two, like being able to streamline that process so that you're not spending like all of your waking hours just sending like cold emails or
Yeah.
something, right? And so that's a lot of like what we focused on. And then like obviously, so you got relevant experience right away, pretty much. You beefed up your resume, you started networking with people, and those things are basically what enabled you to kind of like get selected for interviews, right? And then like we talk about like the interview aspect of things, like in terms of like, because you use the M&I 400 guide, right? I think like a very common question that we get all the time is like, is there everything you need already in the M&I 400 questions guide? Like, what's different about what Wall Street Mastermind teaches versus what's in those guides? Like, what would you say to someone who kind of like has that question?
Yeah, I think sitting in an interview and getting grilled on understanding valuation that I've worked on was really when it came to me that it going through that guide wouldn't have taught me everything that's going on behind the scenes. When you're really getting into questions, I had multiple interviews where they're like, I really don't want to use numbers here. I want to see how you think. And I think had I gone through the M&I 400, I would have understood math problems. I wouldn't have understood what goes on behind a lot of technical analysis or just different technical pieces to banking. And I think that was really big for me is the accelerated technical mastery program, like understanding each piece of that was really important for me and actually allowed me to articulate what is going on in certain situations with bankers because I think had I not done that program, I would have been caught flat-footed so many times.
So it sounds like when you were using the M&I 400 questions guide, you were just like trying to memorize like 20 questions at a time, like you said, and like this is the question and this is what I should say, and then this is the question, this is what I should say, versus in Wall Street Mastermind when you were learning the same technical concepts, you weren't memorizing answers to specific questions, but you were actually learning the concepts themselves and like to the point where you're able to explain it regardless of what the question is. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yep, exactly. Like if you ask me right now a particular change on the three statements from the M&I 400, I couldn't tell you, but I could write it out for you and get it right. So I think that's the big change is really understanding how everything works.
Got it. So is that difference just stemming from like, I don't know. I mean, like, is it just that like, hey, if you're reading a guide on your own, there's no one to like teach it to you. So the best way you know how to learn it is to just memorize the thing versus in our program, you have someone actually like explaining these concepts to you. So you don't need to memorize anything or like what, I mean, I know the answers, but like, I'm just trying to help people understand like, how is it so different? Cause like a DCF is a DCF, right?
Yeah.
Like income statement is income statement, like, you know, it's the same concepts, right?
Yeah. When you really have it broken down for you and taught to you, that's when you really get to understand it. And having both the lessons and also mock interviews that you're looking at, understanding how those questions can get broken down, and then the explanations as to how to explain those concepts. You're not just reading it because so many times you're going to read something and say, I understand it. But when you actually have someone teaching it to you, you actually will begin to understand how everything works. And I think that's really important. And then also being able to ask those questions. If after the lessons you don't quite understand it, you can go ask students in the program, ask Sam if you have still follow-up questions is really important to you actually understanding it instead of just going through a guide because you don't truly understand all the different nuances unless you're having it taught to you in a way that teaches those different aspects of it.
Got it. Yeah. So essentially the analogy here is kind of like if you're in school, you can try to learn everything by like you can buy a textbook and never go to class, never go to lecture, and just stay home and read the textbook on your own and try to learn everything that way. Or you can go to class and have your professor explain stuff to you and go to section and have your TA answer questions and like do the assignments and make sure you're actually comprehending everything. And the level of learning that you're going to be able to do between those two methods is just going to be a night and day difference, essentially. Got it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I guess like, was there anything in terms of like the process that we put you through? Like, we kind of talked about the modules, right? We talked about like, yeah, we taught you, I mean, we helped you beef your resume. We taught you how to network. We helped you with all of your interview answers. So we talked a lot about like what we did. In terms of like how we went about it, like, was there anything in particular that you found to be like the most helpful to you, or like just like a big difference maker, I guess, versus like, say, if you had just like try to do everything on your own, like what was the biggest difference for you, I guess?
Yeah, I think we've gone through a lot of the structure of kind of what you're provided, but I think one thing that is just so invaluable in terms of joining the program is the community that you're around. You're constantly being pushed in terms of you see someone that has recently got an internship or something of that nature, and that kind of shows you, oh, look, there's stuff going on right now. I need to be on it. Or for me, for my kind of position that I got, it became pretty specific in terms of group and understanding, okay, I really need to have that knowledge as to understanding what that field is like and seeing in the Slack channels, here's some resources in terms of researching this industry or kind of understanding what are some technicals that can kind of come with looking at this industry. And there's just these questions that you probably don't even have right now if you're thinking about joining the program that that are going to come up in your process, and the ability to so quickly ask them or see a question that you would have never asked and then have that answer and be like, I really needed to know that. I think there's so much value in that, and that's what really helped me get over the hump in the end, is seeing other people doing it around me and being able to leverage them as resources. And then also having the kind of hot seats, watching the interviews, the mock interviews, seeing students in the program, seeing where you can improve in interviews, and also just what are some good answers. And then also just having the office hours where you can ask questions, whether it be behavioral, technical, networking, really kind of iron out some of the different pieces that you might have questions on is really helpful. So I think there's just so much value across the board. Literally every single aspect of the recruiting journey can be answered by joining the program. And if it's not, there will be a new module that will come out and it will answer it. So there's not going to be a single piece that you're not going to be helped with. So I think that's what's so good about the program.
Yeah, I think the last one is going on a lot because it's literally true. We try to make it so that this is like a one-stop shop that has everything you need. Like the goal is for you to like never have to go outside of Wall Street Mastermind to find anything that you need for recruiting, right? And sometimes like we periodically will put out like new trainings and whatever because maybe we learn a new strategy or a new tactic that like working really well, or like we have hundreds of students and someone tries something that's just like working like bonkers and we're like, oh, let's share it with everyone else. And anytime the same question starts bubbling up over and over again, like we get the same question 5 times in a row, like we're going to go and create a training on it, so that because a lot of other people probably have the same questions, right? And to your point, it's like I think that the leveraging the power of the community, of the network, of like the fact that we've had, I mean, 500 plus students have gone to the program to date. That's huge because recruiting can be a very lonely process, especially going to a school like yours where no one else is really trying to do what you're trying to do. I mean, it's so hard. It's such a grind. You have nobody to talk to. You have no idea what else is going on in like the recruiting process, right? And so you're just kind of in the dark versus like here in this community, like you guys are constantly just sharing intel with each other, whether it's like recruiting timelines, where's each firm at in their process, has anyone interviewed with this firm before, what are like the questions that they typically ask. I mean, people contribute all the questions that they got in interviews like back into a centralized database. Like there's just so much stuff that people are doing to like kind of help each other out, which is like really amazing to see actually, because I think when we first started Wall Street Matchmaking, like I wasn't, to be completely honest, I wasn't expecting that. Like I thought it would be like this cutthroat thing where people keep everything to themselves and don't want to help each other out because it's like a zero sum game in people's minds. Like turns out it's actually not, right? And I feel like everyone in the program is like winning together. And to your point, you being able to ask questions anytime you want, obviously, that's a huge convenience. I feel like versus like because most people are having to go online and do a bunch of searches, and every time they have any little question, and they may or may not find the answer, versus you can definitively find the answer. But more importantly, I think like you made a really good point about seeing questions that other people are asking that you wouldn't even have thought to ask in the first place until you see it, and then you're like, oh, actually, I have the same question too, right? And that is what going back to what we were saying in the beginning about how a lot of times you might be doing something and you feel like you're doing a pretty good job. It's because you have no frame of reference, right? But now being able to see how other people interview, being able to see how other people, what kind of questions other people are asking, like what that does is that uncovers a lot of the things that would have been in your blind spot. And you're like, oh, actually, like I need to go change this, or oh, I need to tweak my approach here. And that just like allows you to become like a much more well-rounded candidate, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So I think your point about the community is absolutely a huge one. So it's almost like even if you go to a non-target school, now that you're in this community, you have all the advantages that target school students typically have.
Yeah.
Right? And that can help you level the playing field tremendously. So I guess like what, and I realized we forgot to talk about this, but like what was a successful outcome for you?
Yeah, so I'm going to be working for KeyBank Capital Markets in their utilities, power, and renewable energy group, primarily focusing on renewable energy.
That's awesome. And so that'll be your junior summer internship. And I mean renewable energy, like that's a pretty exciting group. I feel like there's a lot of tailwinds for that industry. I mean, renewable energy is kind of the future. So that's interesting though. Like so for KeyBank, they actually had you recruit for a specific group. Like they don't put you through a group placement process after you get the offer.
Yeah, so they had a really interesting process. So you kind of apply. If the overall bank is interested in you, then they'll have you kind of answer a survey where you rank the different groups and your interest, and then your resume will then be sent to those groups. And if those groups are then interested in you, then you can see if you're moving forward in the process. So I think it was really great for me to have that relevant experience across different things. Also having the investment banking experience was really helpful for me to kind of move forward in the process there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great because I think that's a good way of doing things, because a lot of the banks actually what they do is they give you an offer for the firm as a whole, and then you go in and you don't really know what group you're going to end up in, and you have to go through a group placement process. And if you're lucky, you get into a group that you like. If you're unlucky, you get into a crappy group that you didn't want. Yeah. And sometimes people are choosing between like multiple different offers, and the big question mark is like, well, I don't know, like what group am I going to end up in, right? And there's no guarantees. So I think that's great that they let you know up front. I guess one last quick question for you then. Now that you've gone through the process and you've gotten the offer and you're on the other side, is there one piece of advice that you want to share with people who are maybe still going through the process or about to go through the process now? Maybe someone who's, in a similar shoes as you, like maybe they go to a small school, don't have a lot of alumni or whatever. Like it could be anything, like maybe something that someone told you along the way that really helped you tremendously that you want to kind of share with our followers.
Yeah, I think first for people that are going to be going through the process, you can never start too early. Absolutely never start too early, whether it's your first day on campus as a freshman or you're a sophomore. You can never start too early, whether it's networking, whether it's putting in applications once those are available, or just kind of interview prepping, anything of that nature. You can never start too early. And I think also kind of seeking others along the journey is also huge, because like you've mentioned, you don't know where you are in comparison to other people. And I think it's really hard to gauge how successful you are along the process unless you find where others are. Because when it really boils down to it, you're competing with other people for these positions.
Yeah.
And if you think you're at the top, but you're really in the bottom 10%, you might never get an interview, which you're not even, there's no chance you're going to get an internship if you're not even being asked to interviews.
Yeah.
So I think really seeking the advice of others is my big tip that I would provide. And then also just start early with that advice and just start early in general.
Yeah. That's all great advice. I mean, you're absolutely right. You can never start too early, especially nowadays with how early the recruiting
Yeah.
campaign starts. And it's earlier and earlier every year. Like next year will be earlier than this year, and I
Yeah.
don't know, like we'll see what happens. Eventually they'll be recruiting high school kids, but and then like yeah, like being able to actually like accurately calibrate how you stack up against the competition. I think is like that's one of the biggest things that's missing for a lot of people is everyone's so focused on just like what they're doing in terms of prep, and it's almost like everyone has blinders on and they're not like thinking about like what everyone else is doing because there's no real good way to like figure that out outside of an environment like what we have here in Wall Street Mastermind, right? So like, but like that's absolutely critical because you don't want to just guess, or you don't want to just like say, oh, fingers crossed, I think this is good enough, like because it may or may not be, right? And chances are the vast majority of people don't get in, right? So most of the people that are doing that, more often than not, you're going to be in the group that doesn't make the cut than the group that actually makes the cut, right? So it's important to have certainty. And then like, if you're not quite where you need to be at, that's totally okay. Then as long as you have that feedback, then you can work on it and you know what you need to do, right? And if you know what you need to do and you have enough time to do it, then like you should be able to get it done, right? So there's no like magic secret sauce or whatever. It's like actually pretty simple when you break it down like that. So I think that's great advice, guys. For those of you that are still with us, if you find that maybe you're currently trying to recruit or think about recruiting, but you're like just in an environment where you don't have a lot of support or there's not a lot of people trying to do what you're trying to do, and you feel like this is a pretty lonely process, like that's totally normal. There's a lot of people feeling like you out there. And if you're looking for a community where you don't have to do everything alone, where you can leverage the power of the community, of the network that we built, and also like where you can get just more structure and guidance around exactly what you're supposed to be doing step by step, so that you're putting your best foot forward and you're getting the optimal outcome, then I want to encourage you to just book a call with our team, right? Like basically you could book a free virtual coffee chat. Like Aidan said, like you'll get to talk to one of the alumni that's gone through our program first. It's basically just an upperclassman who's already got an offer. They'll do a coffee chat with you, talk about whatever you want to talk about, answer questions about recruiting, give you some advice. They can share their experience with Wall Street Mastermind if you want to know about that. And then like, based on that conversation, if you still want to learn more about our program, or if you're interested in working with us, they can set you up with our team. And, we can learn more about your situation to see like what you need help with, how much help you need, and if we're actually a good fit to provide the help that you need, right? Because sometimes we are, sometimes we're not. And we don't work with that many people. So, but if we are a good fit and you do want to move forward, then we can walk you through what that might look like. Or even if not, then at a minimum, we'll just give you some advice on what we think you should do if you're not working with us, right? So either way, like we try to provide as much value as we can. You walk away with just some actionable things that you can implement with or without us, and hopefully that helps you either way, right? So if you guys want to do that, you can go to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street's abbreviated to ST, so it's wallstmastermind.com/apply, and we look forward to talking to you. All right. So with that said, Aidan, I want to thank you for taking time to talk to us today. And again, I think it's an amazing accomplishment. Like we said in the beginning, like not many people from your school break in straight out of undergrad, no less. And it's always nice to not have to go to business school if you don't have to go to business school, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It's very expensive, and it's 2 years where you don't get to work. And I mean, you might still go back to business school at some point, who knows? But I always think it's better to go back, like maybe after you've done some banking and, or maybe, you know, like a lot of people do 2 years of banking, 2 years of PE, and then they go back to business school. And at that point, you're getting into a much better school because your resume is so much better, right? And so I think like sequencing matters, but regardless, I think great outcome for someone like you, and I'm super happy for you and super proud of you, man. So
Appreciate it.
yeah. So, you know, look forward to seeing what you accomplish next summer. Obviously, don't be a stranger. If you have any other questions or need anything along the way, you know how to find us. So, but with that said, guys, thank you guys for tuning in. We're gonna wrap it up here, and if you guys have other questions, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, you know, we'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future. All right. Until next time. Bye.